Good morning, distinguished chairs, respected colleagues, and fellow participants. It is my great honor to present our research titled, A Study to Investigate the Inclusive Education Literacy of Pre-Service Preschool Teachers at Hunan University of Humanities Science and Technology. HUHST. China. I am Cao Tingting, a doctoral candidate at the Faculty of Education, UITM, and also a faculty member at Hunan University of Humanities, Science and Technology in China. This collaborative research has been carried out under the invaluable guidance of my supervisors, Dr. Roslinda and Dr. Khadija from UITM, whose expertise has been instrumental in shaping this work. Our study focuses on a critical but often overlooked area in inclusive education, the preparedness of future preschool teachers. Specifically, we aim to investigate the current state of inclusive education literacy among pre-service teachers at a local application-oriented university in China. We are truly grateful for this opportunity to share our findings at the International Conference on Disability Inclusion 2025. Introduction. Globally, inclusive education is recognized as a cornerstone of educational equity, as emphasized in key UN documents. In China, national policies also highlight this commitment. Yet, a significant gap remains between policy and practice. For example, the enrollment rate of children with special education needs in kindergartens is still low. And one critical barrier is the lack of teacher preparedness. Looking at existing research, we find three main gaps. First, most studies focus on in-service teachers, overlooking the pre-service stage. Second, research tends to emphasize attitudes, while neglecting practical knowledge and skills. Third, there is a geographical bias, with most studies conducted in developed regions, leaving local universities underrepresented. Our study was designed precisely to address these gaps by investigating the inclusive education literacy among pre-service preschool teachers at HUHST. So what is preschool inclusive education literacy? Scholars generally agree that preschool inclusive education literacy can best be understood as a three-dimensional construct: attitudes and beliefs, knowledge and skills. The evidence reveals two major patterns. Internationally, pre-service teachers often hold positive attitudes but feel underprepared for practice. They believe in inclusion philosophically but lack the confidence to implement it. In the Chinese context, the situation is more complex. Pre-service teachers support equal rights in theory but hesitate to accept inclusive placements in practice. Moreover, they show significant gaps in knowledge and skills, leading to what we call the knowledge-attitude practice gap, where beliefs are not effectively translated into classroom action. This synthesis highlights the three key gaps our study addresses: the neglect of pre-service preschool teachers, the overemphasis on attitudes, and the lack of research in local institutions. To investigate these issues, we employed a cross-sectional survey design. Our population consisted of all 593 preschool education majors at HUHST, from which a purposive sample of 262 students was selected using Krejci and Morgan's table. Data was collected via an online questionnaire consisting of 44 items across three dimensions: attitudes and beliefs, knowledge, and skills. This instrument, adapted from Wang, 2012, and Guo, 2019, proved highly reliable with an overall Cronbach's alpha of 0.923. We analyzed the data using SPSS version 22.0, applying descriptive statistics to compute the means and standard deviations for each dimension. This approach provided a solid foundation for evaluating the current state of inclusive education literacy. Results of the study. Our findings reveal a mixed picture. Overall, Pre-service teachers' inclusive education literacy stands at a moderate level, mean equals 3.19. But this average conceals important disparities. Their attitudes and beliefs are relatively strong, mean equals 3.72, while their knowledge is notably low, mean equals 2.86. And their skills remain weak, mean equals 3.02. This demonstrates an unbalanced profile where positive attitudes are overshadowed by gaps in knowledge and practice. Looking more closely, attitudes reveal a paradox. On the one hand, over 80% affirmed the rights of children with special needs and recognized the value of professional development. On the other hand, only 35.9% considered inclusive education truly necessary, and fewer than half were willing to include children with special needs in their own classrooms. This shows a clear gap between endorsement in principle and willingness in practice. Knowledge levels fall into the medium-low range, with the most critical weaknesses in educational assessment and instructional knowledge. Only about 20 to 25% of participants felt confident in developing IEPs, managing behavior, or applying effective teaching strategies. Practical skills show a similar pattern. While collaboration with colleagues was a relative strength, essential classroom practices, such as differentiated instruction, alternative communication, and IEP development, were poorly developed. These deficiencies represent immediate barriers to effective inclusive practice. Discussion 1. Taken together, these findings highlight an unbalanced literacy structure. Positive attitudes coupled with serious deficiencies in knowledge and skills. This reflects the knowledge-attitude practice gap described by Guo, 2019. 2. The contradiction between high philosophical agreement and low practical acceptance is not mere resistance, but rather a deep concern about feasibility. As Quan and Li, 2011, argued, attitudes toward inclusion are complex and context-sensitive. Our participants are clearly aware of the gap between ideals and reality, which undermines their willingness to act. 3. Most importantly, the severe deficits in assessment and individualized teaching confirm Hepburn et al. 2021, and DeBoer et al. 2011, who emphasized that these are the core techniques for high-quality inclusion. Yet, our findings show that despite policy advances, little progress has been made since Zhang and Li, 2014. 4. Thus, our study not only confirms existing concerns but also pinpoints the specific crux of the problem, offering clear targets for teacher preparation. Conclusion and recommendations. In conclusion, our study highlights 3 core findings. 1. Pre-service teachers' inclusive education literacy is medium to low, with an unbalanced structure summarized as passable attitudes, deficient knowledge, and weak skills. 2. Their positive attitudes are internally contradictory, supportive in theory, hesitant in practice. 3. Knowledge and skills are the weakest link, particularly in assessment. Differentiated instruction, behavior management, and IEP development. Based on these findings, we recommend that, first, restructuring the curriculum, adding core inclusive courses and integrating inclusive principles into existing subjects. Second, strengthening practicum opportunities through case-based teaching, simulation, and stable practice bases in inclusive courses. Third, enhancing support systems by developing faculty expertise and building collaborative learning communities. Future research should investigate the factors influencing inclusive education literacy and use action research to refine these recommendations, providing evidence for more scientific pre-service training models. Acknowledgement. Finally, we express our sincere gratitude to the pre-service preschool teachers at HUHST who participated in this study. We are deeply thankful to Dr. Roslinda and Dr. Khadija for their invaluable guidance and continuous support. Thank you very much for your attention. I welcome any questions.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day to everyone. My name is Mahfuza Rafiq, and today my topic is the experiences of hearing impaired students with speaking assessment at university. And we're going to look at what is happening, what are the experiences of these students inside ESL classroom, inside learning English language. Now, the outline of my presentation is I'm going to cover 6 aspects, and we will start with introduction and we will end with recommendation. Now, looking at introduction, the first part, when we talk about students with hearing impairment at university, we can't run from looking at inclusive education, which has emerged as one of the significant priority in the higher education at the moment. Now, most universities are striving to establish equal learning environments to provide conducive environment for students with disabilities, those with special needs, and of course, by looking at the students with hearing impairment as well. Now, another issue that we want to highlight here is the need of having speaking assessment, which is actually compulsory at university when it comes to English language subject. And English language subject is a must for all of the graduates at university at the moment. Therefore, we would like to see what are the experiences that they are having inside the ESL classroom, because we have looked at certain studies and researchers saying that some assessments, some language assessments in higher education often fail to accommodate the requirement of the students with hearing impairment, particularly when it comes to speaking assessment. How the speech is actually evaluated, how are they actually behaving or conducting themselves inside a group assessment or speaking assessment. So this is the issue that we are having at the moment. The aim of the study, from the research question here, we can see that we're trying to look at what are the experiences of these students with speaking assessment and how do they actually experience the process and what are the outcomes of such assessments at the moment. Because of that, let us move to the next one. Okay, we have literature review, some theory, some framework that become the principle and the basic in the study. We have questions input hypothesis, focusing on comprehensible input, which allow learnings to happen. But when it comes to speaking assessment for the hearing impaired students, we're looking at whether the visual or contextual input is enough or is just to be able to aid or to assist their speech production while doing the speaking assessment. Now, we also have theories like Vygotsky or Swain's, for example, and definitely universal design for learning, which aim to provide alternative form and to cater the needs to balance out between the disabled and non-disabled students, and to strive for a flexible kind of learning design. Um, Therefore, as I mentioned before, we are looking at the experiences of the students. Therefore, the best method that we can use is actually phenomenological study. And in this study, we are using transcendental phenomenological study to look at the life world views and the life experiences of the students. And the data analysis is using Mustako's 1994 textual and structural description. Now let's look at the participants that we have. In this study, we have 3 participants, 2 females and 1 male, all under the disability, hearing disability or hearing impairment. 2 of them under the category 3 of hearing lost, and one of them under the category of 4. Participant C, she can do sign language. However, due to certain limitations of people who are able to do sign language at university, she did not practice that much. Okay. Now, looking at the finding and discussion from the textual and structural analysis, we found 4 main themes or 4 issues that was mentioned by the students with hearing impairment while doing the speaking assessment. Now, the first one is group members, second is sitting arrangement, the third one is pronunciation and vocabulary, and the last one is the language lecturer's involvement. Now, these are the issues that they are having and the experiences that they have while doing the speaking assessment. Now, looking at the first one, which is the group members, PA here stands for participant A, PB for participant B, and PC for participant C. Now, looking at the quotation of what they said, PA had quite an unpleasant kind of experience whereby most of the group members refused to cooperate with her because some of them did not understand what she said. She was quite nasal and there's certain pronunciation problem, and that made her being ostracized, being sidelined by them, and even to the extent whereby they do not want to be grouped together with participant A because they're fearing of the marks allocation and whatnot. And this is where I can see a trace of autism, which actually dampened the experiences of the participant A while doing speaking assessment, and that caused her to withdraw totally from the speaking assessment, and in the end she obtained a very, very low marks and low score for this particular group discussion. When it comes to PB and PC, they had a very pleasant experience, especially PC. For them in particular, their peers are quite attentive. They maintain eye contact, allow lip reading movement to be seen, and avoid overlapping conversation because they are going to get very confused if like 2 or 3 people are speaking at the same time. So the group members are quite attentive in that sense. Now, the next point or the next issue that we have here is the seating arrangement. Now, conventional classroom seating arrangement for speaking activities, if you have 4 members in a group, you are going to face each other like two and two facing each other in a square kind of position. Now, what happened to PA was some of the group members refused to look up while speaking. So once they looked down, she could not lip read, she could not see the mouth movement. And this is made more difficult when it comes to sitting arrangement of 2 and 2 facing each other because she can't see what the next person is saying. Now, another experience highlighted by PB or participant B was he was not actually arranged in a square position. He was arranged in a line, a straight line position, whereby 4 of them are lining up in front of the lecturer, and they do the speaking assessment that way. And it was a horrible experience, as what he said, because he could not only that he could not read the other members, there was a communication barrier because the voices are blocked in the middle, so he can't hear and he can't have a visual access to the lip movement as well. As for PC, she was quite lucky because she only had a partner, like only 2 of them, doing a role playing of a situation, and she sat facing the partner, and the partner was quite supportive, though. Therefore, she had a very good experiences with the sitting arrangement. Then this is actually a proof and an evidence that conventional classroom practice might be unsuitable for the students with hearing impairment when it comes to group discussion. Semicircular or circle kind of arrangement is way, way better for lip reading, which is not being practiced at university at the moment. Maybe some of them, yes. But from the study, we found that it's either a straight line or a square position. So it's kind of difficult for them. Now, we move to pronunciation and vocabulary. For these students with hearing impairment, there's a very distinct features of pronunciation that I found during the observation and interview as well, because some pronunciation are definitely incomprehensible. Coupled with the nasal sounds that they're producing, they have very nasal voice. They have sort of like distorted phonetics, and these actually hampering the communication with the other parties or the other group members. As what you can see from the screen, PA could not hear certain phonetics like the S, the ch, or r, and whatnot, and some of the sound made from S, T, D. Even for PC, for example, she could not pronounce the word G, the G sound. So when she was using any words that has the G sound in the vocabulary, she omitted it altogether without the G sound. So these difficulties, in our opinion, due to the limited auditory feedbacks, and it actually become a challenge to perceive the phonetics, because once they cannot hear the correct sounds, they could not produce the sound itself. So it comes from what they can't hear, and that leads to the problem of pronunciation. And that's why we can see the sign of omitting certain phonetics, and also there's not much of auditory reinforcement during language learning. We see that there's a lot of lacking in full access to the sound patterns itself. There's also another thing that we found by looking at the pronunciation and vocabulary, because once the phonetics were missing, the prosodic features were also off altogether. The prosodic features are the stresses that they use when they're speaking, the pauses, the rhythm. So that's why we see that some students with hearing impairment, aside from being nasal, they do not have a very rhythmic kind of pattern in speaking. It's like a monotonous tone in the sentence itself. So these are prosodic features that we found during the interview. And for the last issues is the language lecturer's involvement. Now, some are supportive, but we have to admit that some are not supportive as well. Now, PA was having, and PA and PB was having a horrible time with the language lecturers. PA was forced to speak, like urged to speak, kept on being told to speak, and she could not do that because she can't hear the question, she can't respond to it. PB was having a little bit of body shaming, belittling his ability from the language lecturer's involvement. But PC had a very wonderful experience. The lecturers helped her a lot, assisted her, allow her to have pauses during speaking for her to process the information, and an extra time for her to read and giving responses and whatnot. So she had a very good experience. Now, from all of these, we can see that there's a mixture of accessibility. There's a mixture of amount of fairness given, amount of accommodation, amount of emotional supports given to them. And these unsupportive actions from the language lecturer, these reduce their motivation to speak, not just in assessment, in speaking in general. And this heightened anxiety, about the effective filter as well. The unfair evaluations when accommodations are not being made and adjustments were lacking. Now, we can just imagine how far and how scared they are with the process, as well as getting the low marks and whatnot. Now, for the last part, the recommendation, there are certain recommendations that I would like to point out here. First is about the UDL, the Universal Design for Learning. We know that most of the lecturers, language lecturers at university, we have been trained, we have been exposed to Universal Design for Learning. However, we do believe, and me and my friends, the group members, we do believe that specialized training are needed, particularly in the area of language testing and evaluation. Now, these lecturers, we need to be trained on how to evaluate properly. How are we going to move around listening to a distorted sound and distorted pronunciation? How are we going to move around with looking at the speaking assessment rubrics? Therefore, there's a huge and there's a strong need to re-evaluate of the assessment rubrics, specifically on pronunciation, on communicative ability criteria. Now, this is very, very vital because we cannot make the same benchmark of the non-disabled students rubric with the disabled students, particularly those who are lacking in terms of hearing and therefore affecting their speaking part. So Uh, for us, it's very important to look at the rubrics again. And the last recommendation here is about encouraging self advocacy. From the interview, we found that most of them do not want to demand or to ask for adjustment or accommodation. They rather receive whatever that is given to them. So instead of letting them becoming the passive participants or the passive recipients of the accommodations or their rights, even, we have to empower them, we have to encourage them. You need to learn how to demand and to know what you want in your learning process, the speaking assessment or in the classroom itself. So encouraging self-advocacy is very, very important for the hearing impaired students so that it will guarantee the smoothness of their experiences in the English language classroom, to be more precise. I think that's all for the presentation today. Thank you so much for listening. Have a nice day.
Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. I am Zarina Zaino from University Technology Mara, and today I'll be sharing our study entitled Tactile Sensory Responses in Art Therapy for Autistic Children. This work was carried out under the National Autism Resource Center, NARC, in collaboration with NASUM and therapists from AIMS Therapy Learning Center. Our study explores how structured art activities can support autistic children in developing sensory, motor, and emotional skills. Over the next few minutes, I'll take you through the background of our study, the research design, key findings, and what these findings mean for art therapy practices in Malaysia and beyond. So throughout the session, we'll go through introduction, a research objective, a related literature, art program structure, methodology, key findings, and discussion. Everyone knows that art therapy has been used for many years to help children with autism to improve communication, manage emotions, and to build fine motor skills. Autistic children often struggle with social interaction and also sensory sensitivity, and art provides a safe and creative space for them to express themselves without relying too much on words. While past studies have confirmed that art therapy brings benefits in different areas, but not many have looked at structured art program that combine several developmental goals such as sensory integration, creativity, and emotional regulation all at once. So this was what motivated our team to design a structured 6-month art program and observe its impact on autistic children aged 9 to 13 years old. Our research had three main objectives. First, we wanted to see how structured art sessions could help improve fine motor skills and sensory processing among autistic children. Second, we aimed to observe how art activities influence communication and emotional expression because many children with autism find it easier to express feeling through colors, shapes, and textures rather than through words. And third, we wanted to understand how art participation can build creativity and self confidence among autistic children. So, these objectives guided the design of our 6-month program and helped us evaluate how art can be both educational and therapeutic for autistic children. Recent studies have highlighted the growing role of art therapy in supporting autistic children's development. For example, research by Healy's Autism Center they shows that art therapy can improve sensory integration and also emotional control. A treetop ABA therapy, there has article found that creative art sessions help children communicate better and build self-confidence. Whereas Gulatis and colleagues also reported that art intervention enhance emotional well-being and help children express themselves more positively. And lastly, Hussein and Al Hashmi discussed how sensory based art activities strengthen fine motor coordination and focus. So, this study formed the foundation of our work and showed that structured art therapy can meaningfully support the learning and emotional growth of autistic children. So as for the program structure, okay, the art program includes 6 structured sessions, each with its own developmental focus. We begin with Q-tip painting to train fine motor precision and high and hand-eye coordination. Next was pouring and blowing. These activities was designed for sensory exploration and motor control. Batik art encouraged patience, concentration, and color understandings, whereby scraping techniques promoted creativity and tactile awareness. And finally, Play-Doh. It works to help strengthen finger muscles and provided calming sensory input. Together, these activities supported the children's physical, sensory, and emotional development. As for the methodology, this study used a qualitative observational approach. We worked with 13 autistic children between the age of 9 and 13. The program ran for 6 months with one session each month. Each will last about an hour and a half. The session were conducted by a professional artist who has experience in teaching and also children's illustration. All activities were customized to suit the children's sensory comfort and the skill level with the help of the therapist. Data were collected through direct observation, therapist notes, and the children's artwork. We look at their behavior, the sensory responses, the use of tools, emotional expressions, and level of independence throughout the whole session. This approach allows us to capture meaningful changes in their progress over time. So there are 3 main key findings. The first one is sensory and motor skills. Over the 6 months, we observed clear improvement in fine motor controls and the children's ability to handle art tools. Many participants showed better grip, coordination, and precision, especially during Q-tip and batik activities. Their focus and attention span also improved. They were able to stay on task longer and complete their artwork with less distraction. We also noticed greater independence. At first, many children needed prompts and guidance, but as time went on, they started working more confidently and independently. So, these outcomes show that art based exercises can effectively enhance both sensory and motor development when conducted in a structured and supportive setting. The second key finding was about creative and emotional expression. Children began showing more confidence in their artistic ideas. They became braver in experimenting with colors, shapes, and design. As they grew comfortable, they also used more descriptive language to explain their artwork. For example, saying things like, "This is a bright sky," or "I made this using my favorite colors." So they start to exchange, start to communicate and tell the peers about their favorite things. Many also showed visible joy and satisfaction after completing their works. We saw more smiles, laughter, and excitements. This is a sign of emotional engagement and happiness. We can also see the smiles in the parents' face. So this suggests that art therapy can help autistic children to express themselves emotionally and build self-esteem in a safe environment. The third key findings is relating to communication and social skills. During group sessions, children started to talk more with their peers. They share tools and ask questions about each other's artworks. So they also practice social skills like taking turn and giving compliments. So discussing their creation helped to improve both verbal and nonverbal communication. So this progress indicates that art therapy can be an effective medium to bridge communication gaps and foster social connection among autistic children. So now we come to the discussion and conclusion. So our findings support previous research showing that art therapy help autistic children to improve sensory integration, creativity, and emotional growth. So the structured nature of our program with clear steps and repeated exposure help children to gain focus, confidence, and independence. At the same time, the flexibility of each sessions allow us to adjust activities according to each child's sensory sensitivity. For example, some preferred using tools instead of touching paint directly, and that was perfectly fine. We allowed them to do so. So, this balance between structure and flexibility made the session both therapeutic and enjoyable, ensuring that every child could participate comfortably. To summarize, our 6-month art program showed that the structured art therapy can bring many positive outcomes for autistic children. We saw improvements in fine motor skill, the sensory processing, creativity, and communication, along with visible growth in confidence and emotional expression. So, art provides a unique space where autistic children can explore, create, and express themselves freely without the pressure of verbal communication. Therefore, we believe that structured art programs can complement other therapies to help children with autism develop holistically and improve their quality of life. Like many qualitative studies, our research had some limitation. The sample size was small and we did not include control groups. For future research, we suggest involving a larger number of participants and to include a comparison group to better understand the impact of art therapy. Before I end, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to the Faculty of Computer and Mathematical Sciences, FSKM, the National Autism Society of Malaysia, NASOM, and also DAO Malaysia for their funding and also continuous support. We are also thankful to the parents and children who participated in this study. Their commitment and enthusiasm made this project meaningful. Thank you all for your kind attention. I look forward to any questions or comments. If you have any question or you have any comment, you can freely send it to our email narc@uitm.edu.my. I think that's all. Thank you again. Assalamualaikum.
Hi all, welcome to the International Conference on Disability Inclusion. My name is Dr. Nina Farisha. I am Senior Lecturer representing from Faculty of Hotel and Tourism Management Puncak Alam, Selangor. My prior education was from Bachelor degree in Hospitality Management and Master degree from UITM and Doctorate Philosophy from The content outline for this presentation include introduction, research issues, conceptual model, literature review, methodology and conclusion. First of all, this study is to highlight about the hospitality industry inclusivity for people with disability behavior. However, the physical infrastructure encompasses attitude that shape the experience of diverse guests. While this model is to measure the service excellence integrate the accessibility considerations that has limited academic attention. The role of technology nowadays has changed the landscape of service quality and disability. The changes such as by having AI assistants, smart cities and universal design and e-learning for remote work opportunities. The research issues for this study is about the implementation of inclusivity and accessibility in hotels are still limited, especially the physical infrastructure. Therefore, this study is essential for identifying areas for improvement. Therefore, research objectives for this study is to examine the service quality drivers on customer satisfaction of PWD's behavior, to investigate the perceived accessibility as mediator effect and to determine type of disability as moderator effect between service quality and accessibility. Meanwhile, research hypotheses for this study has 4 hypotheses that are: is there a positive effect of service quality and perceived accessibility, the effect of mediation on perceived accessibility, positive effect of customer satisfaction and behavioral intention, and lastly moderation effect of type disability. This is the conceptual model for this study. For literature review, prior studies indicate service quality in hospitality and prior studies of accessibility on customer satisfaction and behavioral intention. As a conclusion, the research methodology for this study is about measurement as standard tools for service quality by indicate accessibility and inclusivity as new measurement. Meanwhile, type of disability as weak or strong variables when PWDs use the same environment or service. Thus, I thank you for your participation.
Assalamualaikum and good morning, respected keynote speakers, distinguished delegates, fellow presenters, and esteemed participants. It is a truly an honor to stand before you today at the International Conference on Disability Inclusion 2025 to share the findings of our study titled Bibliometric Insight into Support System for Students with Learning Disabilities in a Higher Learning Institution. This research was conducted in collaboration with my colleague Dr. Zuraida Muhammad Isa, Noor Azrin Alimi, Nurul Fazila Abdurrahman, and Nani Ilyana Shafi'i. Together, we aim to examine the scholarly landscape of research that supports students with learning disabilities in higher education settings. We believe that by understanding the patterns and direction of existing research, we can better inform future policies and practices to enhance inclusivity across universities, not only in Malaysia but globally. The content for today's presentation are introduction, literature review, method, result, implications for practice, and recommendations. Over the past decades, inclusive education has gained remarkable traction within higher learning institutions. This growing emphasis reflects our collective recognition of diverse students' needs and the moral and institutional responsibility to ensure equitable access to education for all. Within this broader discussion, students with learning disability or LDs deserve particular attention. They represent a group whose academic challenges often extend beyond the usual learning difficulties faced by their peers. Example include dyslexia, which affects reading and comprehension, dyscalculia, which impact mathematical understanding, and dysgraphia, which interfere with writing ability. This condition may not be visible, but the effects are profound, influencing not only academic performance but also self esteem, social interaction, and future employability. According to the Department of Statistics Malaysia 2024, the number of registered persons with disabilities has consistently increased year on year, with learning disabilities forming one of the largest categories in Table 1. This upward trend signals growing societal awareness and willingness to formalize disability recognition and support system, a positive step towards an inclusive education landscape. At University Technology Mara or UITM, this institutional commitment was formalized in 2019 through the establishment of the Unit Perkhidmatan OKU or UPO under the Office of Vice Chancellor. This initiative evolved into the Bahagian Perkhidmatan dan Pembangunan OKU You Deserve, marking an essential shift from informal accommodations to a structured, comprehensive framework for disability support services. Therefore, the study's focus from a bibliometric perspective is to examine how research has evolved in this area and what insight we can gain to strengthen the support mechanism in higher education. The literature surrounding learning disabilities and inclusive education is vast but uneven. The responsibility of higher education institutions to accommodate students with learning disabilities is reinforced by both international frameworks such as the UN Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities and national education policies that advocate for equitable access. A key pedagogical framework that guide inclusive practices is the Universal Design for Learning or UDL. This UDL encourage flexible teaching approaches that cater to diverse learning needs by providing multiple means of representation, engagement, and expression. It also promotes the use of assistive technologies such as text-to-speech software, adaptive keyboards, and learning management tools that enhance accessibility. However, despite policy recognition, empirical studies in Malaysia and elsewhere indicate persistent gap in implementation. For instance, Muhammad Ghazali and colleagues 2024 found that while institutional awareness of UDL has increased, actual integration into classroom practices remains limited. Similarly, research by Torrent and others in 2009 highlighted ongoing barriers, including insufficient academic accommodations, limited faculty training, and inaccessible campus infrastructure. As a result, students with learning disabilities often experience inconsistent support, which hinder their academic engagement and retention. These challenges are not only structural but also cultural, that shaped by attitudes, awareness, and institutional readiness. Therefore, there is an urgent need to move beyond policy rhetoric and towards evidence-based framework that truly enhance inclusion. This is where bibliometric analysis become valuable as it allows us to visualize the intellectual landscape and identify how research itself is shaped practice. Our study adopted a bibliometric research design which systematically analyzed published literature to reveal patterns of knowledge production. We compiled data from major academic databases and applied specific inclusion criteria, particularly focusing on English language publication and to ensure globally comparability. As of 25th of August 2025, a total of 1,032 articles were selected for analysis. The data were processed using Housing Publish and Perish software, which computes key citation-based metrics such as total number of publication, average citation per year, and total citation per year. This approach provides a quantitative overview of scholarly activity, allowing us to evaluate both productivity and impact in the domain of learning disability support system in higher education. The findings of our analysis reveal several significant patterns. First, the temporal distribution of publications shows a steady increase in research output with a notable peak in 2024, recording 90 publications. This was followed closely by 2023 and 2022, which also demonstrated high productivity levels. These consecutive years of strong publications activity suggest not only growing academic interest but also the broader global recognition of the importance of inclusive education and learning support frameworks. This trend may also reflect the influence of digital publishing platforms and post-pandemic research shifts that prioritize accessibility and educational resilience. Second, the citation metrics present interesting insights. The data set recorded more than 16,000 total citations with an average of 16.18 citation per paper. This is a respectable figure indicating moderate scholarly influence. However, further examination revealed that a small number of highly cited papers accounted for a disappropriate large share of total citation. This suggests that a few seminal work that shape much of the discourse, while many studies have yet to achieve wider visibility. Finally, thematic analysis of keywords and subject areas indicate that most studies focus on psychological support, pedagogical innovation, and assistive technology. Fewer study examine policy implementation, faculty readiness, or student life experience that's pointing to potential gap for future exploration. These findings carry important implications for higher education institutions, policymakers, and practitioners. Firstly, policymakers should build upon the growing evidence base by embedding inclusive education principles directly into national higher education policies, quality assurance standards, and accreditation frameworks. Inclusion should not be seen as an add-on, but as a core criterion of educational excellence. Secondly, universities must strengthen both psychosocial and academic support interventions. This includes counseling services, peer mentoring programs, and access to adaptive learning tools that foster independence among students with learning disabilities. Thirdly, intersectional must be considered in institutional frameworks. Learning disability support should take into account factors such as socioeconomic status, gender, and ethnicity, as these often intersect to shape the student's experience. A one size fits all models of inclusion is not sufficient. Lastly, faculty and administrative training remains essential. Lecturers and staff should be equipped with cultural competence, empathy, and practical knowledge of inclusive assessment strategies to ensure that all students, regardless of their abilities, can participate fully and fairly in academic life. Based on our findings, we offer three main recommendations for advancing future research in this area. First, foster interdisciplinary collaboration that bring together education, psychology, technology, and policy experts to create comprehensive support models. Second, strengthen evidence-based institutional practices that ensure university policies are informed by empirical data rather than ad hoc accommodations. Third, advance equity and intersectionality that prioritize research that recognize diversity among students with learning disabilities and tailoring support accordingly. To conclude, this bibliometric study provides a holistic view of the scholarly landscape concerning support systems for students with learning disabilities in higher education. Our finding highlights that while research productivity has grown substantially, particularly over the last 5 years, it is significant challenges remain in translating academic insight into practical, sustainable institutional frameworks. The dominance of social, educational, and psychological themes underscore the need to expand attention towards policy integration, technological innovation, and the life experience of learners. For universities, the message is clear. Inclusive education must evolve from a compliance-based requirement to a culture of compassion and continuous improvement. Only by bridging research and practices can we truly ensure that students with learning disabilities not only access higher education but thrive within it. Before I end, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to the bahagian perkhidmatan dan pembangunan OKU UITM, including UITM Kedah, UITM Kelantan, UITM Selangor, and College Community Sukai Petani for their support and resources that make this study possible. Thank you for your kind attention.